Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fish Tank. I'm Fish, and today we're going to be looking at the Minion Masters PTR. Now, normally I can knock these videos out in just one take. This, unfortunately, is the fourth take. The first one was ruined by a dog barking outside. The second, I accidentally doxed myself. The third, I ran out of hard drive space. So hopefully fourth time is going to be the charm. And before we get into the PTR, I just want to say a huge thanks to everyone because we hit our 2,000 subscriber goal here on YouTube, which is incredible. Thanks so much for everyone that's joining along in this journey. Really appreciate anyone checking out the content, leaving comments, thumbs up, subscribing, all that good stuff. Okay, so back to what we're going to be talking about today, the PTR, which is the public test realm. So this is a place where we, you, I, anyone in the community, because it's public, can test out the upcoming changes to Minion Masters. So normally what happens is 2 or 3 weeks before a patch, the devs will release a new PTR, and that will allow us to check out the 2 new cards that are coming and all the balance changes. So we can test them out and crucially give our feedback. So today we're going to go through how you get involved in that and have a look at the changes. Let me know in the comments if you like this kind of content, because this is kind of somewhat really short-term content, because you know these changes are going to come and go. It's going to be really quick, and then this video is not going to be so relevant ever again. So let me know if you like it and if you want to see them more in the future. So the PTR, so the time scale for the PTR is before we go into that, let me know how you get involved in it. So what you want to do is go to the Minion Masters Discord, which I'll put a link in the description. Go to the roles channel, give yourself the PTR testing role, and then that will open up on the left hand side in the list of channels a couple of channels, which is the public PTR announcement and public PTR discussion. There might be a bug reports one as well. So in the announcements channel, there'll be a link to a document, which I'll show you in a sec, that tells you everything you need to know. And the discussion allows you to get involved, discuss the changes with other people, including the developers who will always be in that channel. That allows a good discussion to go on. Because obviously the whole point of this is for the devs to say, these are the 2 new cards in their proposed design, and these are the proposed balance changes. What do you think of it? And this is a kind of a community-driven effort. It's super easy to watch some OP cards destroy the meta and go, I could have told you that. But one step better than that is actually getting involved earlier in the process, so you can say that's going to be broken and let the devs change it. Because if we look at the sort of the time scale here, what we're talking about is 2 or 3 weeks before the patch, the PTR will be launched. So that's generally on a Friday. That will be open over the weekend, and then on the following Tuesday, the devs normally have a meeting to discuss the results of that PTR. And as we'll see when we look at the form, the whole idea is to test these changes and then give your feedback on the changes. What changes do you like? What changes do you not like? What's too strong? What's too weak? And sort of any other business as well. So this is sort of a joint venture between the devs and the players, and this is open to people of any sort of ability. I think it's important to have new players and existing players in there because they do give differing, their feedback comes from a different place, which doesn't necessarily make anything more or less valuable than the others. Okay, so let's dive into this document that you can get involved with. And of course, as mentioned, it is in the description. So first of all, we're going to look at how you get into the PTR. Super easy. All you need to do is go to your Steam library, right click on Minion Masters, go to properties, go to the betas section, type in this super secret code, PTR Dwarves 22, and then select the public test realm from the drop-down menu. Now, normally this will trigger an update because the game needs to update to this test version. If it doesn't trigger the update, then there's an extra step here where you can force it to detect that it needs to do an update. Once that's done, you'll see Minion Masters in your Steam library has been replaced by Minion Masters Public Test Realm. So if you see that, you know you're good to go. And one other thing to pay attention to, in the top left of the game, you can see the version that you're currently running. If it says 1.48, then that means you're in the test version. There'll be some extra numbers afterwards, but these are sort of the main numbers. And if it's 1.47, then you'll still be in the current live version. And of course, a reminder here, please remember to fill out this survey after testing. You know, it's crucial to test these things, but giving your feedback is where it becomes hugely valuable. And then just some quick instructions here, how to go back to the regular version. It's basically just what we did, but in reverse. So you go to the properties, you go to the betas, you select none, that triggers the update, and you're back where you started from, and you can switch between those as often as you wish. And here's some pictures as well in this document if you get stuck with how to do it. So that's how you get involved. Let's have a look at what is proposed in this PTR. Now, so there's 2 new cards. We're not going to go through them today. I don't really want to spoil the new cards. And also, I want to give you sort of an incentive to get involved in the PTR if you want to see the new cards for yourself. So there's a couple of new Shroomy cards. We got Shroomama Shoomy and Shroomer. So if you want to find out about them, see how they work, test them out, then follow these instructions and get involved. But what we are going to look at is the proposed balance changes. So first of all, we're going to look at the buffs. So Armored Escort, mana cost 5 to 4. So a lot of these will be triggered from things having a particularly low win rate or a particularly low play rate. And this is designed to rectify that. Armored Escort has been a card that's been very problematic to be balanced in the past. We're probably at a stage now where it's okay. Mana reduction is going to make it better. Remember, the way it works now is that the next 2 ranged minions you spawn will be supported with a Crystal Sentry, who also got some nerfs or changes recently. And they will also get Marksmanship and some mana freeze. Cowardly Imps, so their attack speed, or their attack cooldown, to be specific, is going down to 3 seconds. Originally they were at 4, currently 3.5 seconds down to 3. I think they're a good ranged unit if they can get some value outs. The problem is when one of them dies or something dies before they get their attack off, then they fear away and they kind of do nothing. Now, Ghast is one of the newer cards that was added in the Arise DLC, so expansion, so the last patch. He was the cheap version, not Rendreth the Legendary. This is the cheaper version, Ghast. So he had kind of an awkward situation where when he was reviving a skeleton with his ability, that sort of interrupted his attack. So his attack, his DPS wasn't really what it showed it should be if he was constantly reviving. So they've reduced the animation duration by 40% to remove that negative, and they've given him a little bit more health, up to 550 from 50. Hypnotize is getting an extra Slitherbind. Remember, Slitherbind is the mechanic that attaches the Slitherbound to another Slither card in your hand, and generally you want those when you're using the Sacrifice mechanic on something like a Rabid Prowler or a Herald Armoon or something like that. Do check out my video on Slitherbound. Used to be called Cool Slitherbind, but it is the same mechanic. Incubus. So the Incubus will teleport towards a ranged attacker. Now he will do that from further away. So he will trade better. So the way that he works is not changing, but the way that he will trade against certain longer ranged units will be better. One thing to note, and this is how he currently is in the game at the moment, he doesn't teleport to face. Master damage is a special kind of damage. It's not range damage, so he doesn't teleport to face. He used to a year, 6 months ago, something like that, but currently he doesn't do that. Right, a bit of a buff here to King Puff. So his trick swap, the cooldown is going down from 40 seconds to 35 seconds. King Puff kind of got a little bit savage by the changes to the bridges. Not being able to play units directly on the bridge really hurt him with his Night Puff generation and his just general trick swappery. So this is a little buff trying to help give him a bit of a buff to make up for his lost strength in that situation. Now, magnetic bombs, they're going to take 2 seconds instead of 3 seconds to explode after attaching to a target. So that's obviously a good thing, because the quicker something dies, the quicker it stops generating value. And they will do a little bit more damage, up from 90 to 100. Now, Net Blaster, damage going up from 50 to 60. I feel that the Net Blaster, this is something that I would probably report back after just reading this. This isn't really something... A lot of these changes aren't things you necessarily have to test. So if you go into the PTR, really you should... if you're going to test some things, not everything, you should look at testing things like the new cards, or things that are having massive reworks. Things that are just having small little changes like this, not necessarily a priority when it comes to testing. But of course, if you do have the time, do so. And you can also feedback regardless of whether you tested them or not. I feel like the Net Blaster needs a little bit of help so that he can get more value out of his crowd control ability. But of course, anything with a strong crowd control ability needs to be carefully monitored, because if it's too strong, it can just be devastating. For example, look at Unholy Ground this season, or the last couple of seasons. It's been everywhere. So we'll see as we go through this. Maybe we'll see an Unholy Ground nerf, hopefully. Right. Rampant Growth. Rampant Growth is the Zenshi spell that consumes all the shrooms and will heal your unit. It also does a stun as well and a knockback. So they're kind of simplifying the way it works. So instead of the shrooms hitting the unit all at different times, they're all going to hit it at the same time, and it will do a stun 1 second for each shroom consumed. Those are the changes to the Rampant Growth. The things like the heal, I think it's 75 heal per shroom, giving the giant growth, stuff like that is still not going to change. These are just the things that are being changed. Sanctum of Cleansing Fire. Again, every time we see a 4 mana or a 2 mana card mentioned, we're always thinking about, can it now be an APEP free perk, or can it not be? And this is a situation where something's no longer going to be a perk available from APEP. And so at 3 mana, it's going to have the same functionality, except it doesn't have the Empyrean Army trigger. So that was when you placed it down, it dropped the Holy Fire to the closest minion, I think. So it will still drop the Holy Fire to friendly minions taking damage, but no Empyrean Army trigger. Now this is the Snap Freeze change. This is one I'm a little concerned about. So it's no longer going to slow, but it will instantly freeze all minions. So it's effectively just like any other stun. But of course, because it's freezing, then the units take half damage. So it's not the same as a stun, but it's still strong. Immediate freeze, immediate AoE freeze. Remember, it's a big area as well. So this is something that could be very, very strong. And I think we'll feed that back as this could be a little bit too strong. Right, Spirit. The minimum Spirit received is going up from 50 to 75. So smaller units like snipers, things like that, will get more of a benefit from Spirit. A change to Stormy here. So Stormy's Zenshi Flow. Remember, Zenshi Flow is if you use a Zenshi faction card before that, you will get the AoE stun on spawn. So what they've done is they've delinked his stun from his attack delay. And they say here to be the same as Shen and the Zap Shrine. You could be confused by reading that, but basically what this means is that he will, when you play him, he'll do his stun, and then he'll sort of almost immediately go straight into his attack. Previously what happened, he'll do his stun, and then he'd have to wait, and then he'd do his first attack. Whereas this time he's going to stun and then go straight into that chain lightning. So a nice little buff there for Stormy. And remember, Stormy kind of gets a bit of the rough end of the stick sometimes, because Stormy shoots chain lightning. If chain lightning gets nerfed, Stormy gets nerfed. And we've seen a lot of nerfs recently to chain lightning. And this is perhaps making up for some of that value that Stormy has lost from the chain lightning. Sunburn damage going up from 60 to 80. Sunburn, one of the cards that's received endless changes over the patches, over the months, over the years. Just getting a bit more damage. Void Mother Jezra, she is one of the current season cards. She's the 9 mana minion with the Void Tear ability. So she's been pretty underwhelming so far, getting a decent health increase. See if she gets some more playtime. And Zap Shrine is going to stun the closest 2 targets instead of the closest 1 target. And remember, not only does it stun that target, it does like 25 damage or something. So it's going to stun 2 instead of 1. And its duration is going to go down to 12 seconds instead of 16. So a buff in terms of the closest 2 targets getting stunned, a nerf in terms of the duration going down. And remember, this is not going to affect its AoE stun from its Zenshi effect. Right. Now we talk about the reworks. So this is where things get changed in a lot of different ways, or sort of entirely. So the Demon Warrior, and I'm kind of interested to see this because I tried Demon Warrior out this season quite a lot, and having to cycle it 6 times is really punishing because it takes so long to get there. You really have to cut every little bit of fat out of your deck as you can, and that leaves you really vulnerable in the early stages. So what they're going to do is, instead of having to cycle it 6 times, it will be activated on the 4th time. So that's a whole 2 cycles quicker, which is quite substantial. So that means that you don't have to have this really trimmed deck to get the value out of it. But although you get the buff earlier, it only has double stats as opposed to triple stats. It is also having a damage reduction as well, from 100 down to 75. So I like this because I feel like Demon Warrior is such a niche card because you have to have that super cheap deck. This kind of frees it up from that deck building a little bit, but of course it's not quite so much of a win condition on its own, especially with this damage reduction. So I like this change, and I definitely think you would see more Demon Warrior, but it's not so much, oh, you got the Demon Warrior out, you win. Sapphire Pebble. This is an interesting one. So remember, Sapphire Pebbles were basically a building that would have a ranged attack. They would have myriads. You'd get extra copies of them in your deck, and if you played them together, you get a bonus. I don't know how I feel about this change. So the Sapphire Pebble, so it does one attack, right? It dies after attacking. So you spawn it, a unit walks into its range, it does 150 damage in one attack. So that's quite substantial. And then what happens after it has done that attack? So effectively, if you look at the animation, you see that it throws its head. So what happens is you throw its head, it hits something, the head drops on the ground, it has 100 health. If that head is not killed within 5 seconds, then it grows into a new pebble, and the situation, the cycle, can repeat itself. And there are myriad has been removed. So you can spawn it, it does the throw, does 150 damage, then if it's not killed, it can then respawn and get multiple damage. I mean, it sounds kind of interesting. It sounds very different to what it was before. I guess the idea is, why does it need a rework? Do we not like the current way it works? Is it just not in a strong spot? And if so, is this the best way to go? So this is an interesting one for you guys to check out and see what you think. Somewhat interesting because you've got the interaction, the kind of the skill expression of using it as a player at the right time, and of course as an opponent trying to deny it respawning and getting extra spawns. So that's could be interesting to see. Right, Stormbringer. So this is a big change. I can highlight it properly. I can't. To a master. So Stormbringer's attack speed is going down from 4 seconds. So this is attack cooldown. They always call it attack speed, and I always yell at them, it's attack cooldown, because a lower number is better. So it's going down from 4 seconds to 2.8 seconds. So Stormbringer will attack more quickly, but his damage will be only 25 instead of 35. So that means that he'll be much better at dealing with lots of small things compared to what he was at before. Doesn't look like the DPS is going to change too much. So that's his auto attack. And remember, so his auto attack is what he starts with, and then of course it gets global range at perk 1, and then at perk 3 he starts attacking double quickly. So if his attack speed's 2.8 to start with, then his perk 3 could be very powerful. But we'll see how that goes. Right. His perk 2 is changing. So currently his perk 2 is everything that's ranged gets marksmanship, whether that's out in play or has yet to be played. That's going to be changed, so every 10 seconds, the next ranged minion you play gets marksmanship. So this is going to make you, from a deck building perspective and a playing perspective, you're going to be thinking more about where you want the marksmanship on. It's not just going to be a blanket, everything gets marksmanship. You're going to be wanting to pay attention to your perk. Remember, if you look in your perk circles, there'll be a timer, so you know when a buff is available or not. And then you'll want to play the cards that will benefit most from the marksmanship at that particular time. So I kind of like that because it brings a bit more player agency into it, whereas before Stormbringer was kind of effectively it was 3 completely passive perks, right? Auto attack or buffing your units. There was nothing you had to do. There was nothing you really had to pay attention to. Whereas this, it kind of makes it a bit more interesting for the player, which is always a good thing, right? Right, the nerfs. So if you've been following any of my meta-analysis video, maybe we'll put a link up the top somewhere for this, you'll know that Apep's been very strong. Not quite as strong this season as it was last season. It did receive a little attack, what was it, attack cooldown nerf. Whereas this nerf in this patch, this proposed patch, is the perk 1 cooldown. So the perk 1 is your free single-use 2-mana card. You'll get it every 33 seconds instead of every 30. So of course that just means there's longer between these free cards, and it's the perk 1 that's lasting almost the entire match. So over the entirety of the match, that could have a reasonable impact on it. Artera. This is a great one. So Artera has always been problematic when she could shield other Arteras, because they kind of just triggered off each other and it was kind of impossible to do anything against it. They gave her Mythic to combat that, but whilst it did achieve the desired result, it wasn't really the cleanest solution, because Mythic comes with the protection that you can't lightning bolt it, you can't move it with impetus blast, things like that. That doesn't really make sense. She's not really a mythic minion in the real terms of what is a mythic minion. So she's going to lose mythic, but she's going to no longer affect other Arteras. And when we're talking about affecting other Arteras, we're talking about her on-death effect. When she dies, she will rage everything around her, and if they're Empyrean, they will get a Divine Shield. Right, Bara. Bara's seen quite a lot of play recently, I think, especially or maybe only in accursed decks, which are of course everywhere. So the Bara damage is going down from 200 to 175. Remember, the way Bara does his damage is kind of in a channeled beam, so Bara will trade less effectively, be able to kill less things in one hit. Blood Imps. The attack cooldown is going up, so that's a nerf. Their DPS is going down. Blood Imps are a really interesting card because new players think, why would I ever want to play this? And then some of the top players think, why would I ever not want to play this? Because it's just one of those cards that you can get so much value out of if you play them correctly, and if you play them incorrectly, you can get horrifically punished. So it's a strong skill expression card, which we like. Harmful Souls. So this is the removal spell that you find in most accursed decks, which of course has the Accursed Ascension buff, which makes it do even more damage. So, if I remember correctly, before Ascension it does 80 damage 5 times, and after Ascension it does 80 damage 8 times. So previously it was a 640 after Ascension damage spell, which was kind of insane for 5 mana. So it's going to lose 10 damage per Harmful Soul tick, if you like, because remember it does its damage in ticks. So 10 damage, so it's going to lose 50 damage prior to Ascension, and it will lose 80 damage after Ascension. So I don't hate that. I think that's a very strong spell. What's really frustrating when you play against Ascension decks is you know they're going to have Horde. So you pack, if you're lucky enough to have a good matchup, then you have some good AoE to deal with the Horde, like your Blastmancer, for example. And then they just have the Harmful Souls to remove the Horde. Your anti-Horde. So you just can't do anything. Even if you have stuff to play into it. How many times have you tried to play things into the Harmful Souls to protect your unit, and then not only does the unit you're protecting die, everything else dies anyway? Because Harmful Souls was just so strong. Right, Howling Moon. Again, if you watch my meta videos, you will have seen Howling Moon is kind of everywhere. Especially in 2v2s, but also in 1v1s. So the mana is going up to 9 mana from 8. And this is a card I played quite a lot in Milloween deck. And sometimes you just play it for 8 mana on an empty board and you don't feel bad about it. And I think that kind of suggests how strong it should be, right? Because you should get... If you're playing it just for 8 mana for 2 werewolves, then it should be kind of feels bad. But werewolves are in such a strong state anyway that it doesn't seem to be too much of a problem. So reducing that to 9 mana, I think it's still going to be good if you use it at the right time, especially in duos, especially a lot of people play ritual decks, a lot of big meta units, and that's when the Howling Moon can really get some huge value. Right, Jinlong. So another Zenshi Flow. So the change to this, the jump on cooldown when used with Zenshi Flow, what that means is that currently you can trigger the stun. So if you play a Zenshi card before Jinlong, then you can spawn Jinlong, instant stun, then a spell, instantly disappear, and then comes back for another stun. But the proposed change is to prevent that from happening. So when you spawn it with the Zenshi Flow stun, you can't jump away. You've got to wait for the regular cooldown. So that makes it more difficult to use, and probably healthier, because good players can get just insane value out of Jinlong with some cheap spells. It has seen some nerfs since when it was really, really strong. Could this be a nerf too much? I don't know, but again, if you look at my meta videos, you'll see Jinlong has featured in those a lot, so definitely a strong minion getting a lot of playtime. Musketeer, attack speed going up, attack cooldown going up to 1.2 seconds, so it'll attack less quickly. So that means its DPS is going down overall, and it will be worse against Swarm, because it won't be able to clear them so quickly. So a Musketeer overperforming suggests that it's getting way too much value for its 4 mana, so a slight nerf there. This is an interesting one from the point of view that I didn't even consider this was a problem. So apparently wildcarding the Prowler, if you've got 3 of them, it's very, very strong, so they're going to reduce the copies allowed down to 2. I can't really remember the last time I saw someone do this. Cage Prowler for sure. Actual Prowler, not so much. Right, Undying Skeleton. This is a card we see a lot in a curse decks, and one of the most wildcarded cards in any of the 2v2 game modes. So the Undying Skeleton's damage going down from 60 to 50, so a lot less value coming out of that when it's trading, and of course if you've got lots of them up, whether that's from the Undying Skeleton or the Toll of the Dead, there will be less overall damage coming out. Right, we spoke about it earlier, how Unholy Ground was just disgustingly strong for the last couple of seasons, absolutely everywhere. So it's going to get nerfed in a couple of ways. Firstly, the duration is going to go down from 7 seconds to 5 seconds. And it will no longer root ground units. That was one of the reasons it was so strong. The fact it could immobilize ground units meant firstly, your ranged units could trade insanely. Secondly, because the first skeleton spawned immediately, you could throw it... If they spawned a cleaver right next to your unit, you could sometimes throw it down and tank that cleaver just immediately. Which was real kind of feels bad when you're trying to kill some of these units. And when you got to Mana Frenzy, or just generally when you're trying to fight on the bridges, an opponent, or even if you're just using it yourself, anybody using this that can just lock down an area so that you can't get onto a bridge is so, so powerful. And it just gets out of control in Mana Frenzy when the bridges are even more important. And of course, you can wildcard this card, so you get to a stage where you get to Mana Frenzy and you just can't see a bridge because of this. So this is definitely a healthy change. Zealots of the Burning Fist. This is a very highly used card. If you've watched any of my tournament videos, you'll see a lot of these tournament players will play the Zealots in their deck, or they may ban them specifically because they know they are a good card. So mana going up to 7 mana, so that's a nerf. And then remember, there's a trigger where when the first one dies, the second one gets buffed. And I think this is reverting a change that we had previously. So instead of the remaining one gets Berserker Rage, it now gets Haste plus regular Rage, which I think if you do the maths basically works out to the same DPS, but it implements that DPS in a different way. Instead of doing one huge hit, it does more smaller hits. So that's going to be good or bad depending on what you're against. If you're just getting one hit off before you die, then it's bad. If you're surrounded by Horde, then it's good. But I think that's just a case of Zealots just being too strong, too heavily played, too much value, and that's just going to hopefully rectify that. So those are the proposed balance changes. And of course, all you need to do here is put in your Discord, put in the number of games you played against other players, and then get into the next screen where you'll give your feedback on all of the different changes. So hopefully this video will have a few outcomes. Firstly, it will make you more aware of the fact there is a PTR. But a lot of people probably aren't aware of this. This is something that's only kind of mentioned in the Discord. There's nothing on Steam about this. Perhaps I should suggest to them to put a Steam announcement out or something about this to get more people involved. Because, you know, testing things with a small group of people is okay and you get some good feedback. But the more different people you get involved, the more different sort of thoughts and suggestions you make, and the more testing that can be done. So this is, as mentioned earlier, this is kind of a community driven thing where I can get involved with the devs, test things out, and then hopefully for the good of the community and the good of the game, when the patch is launched, everything will be in a perfectly balanced state, the new cards will be perfect, everything will be great. And yeah, so that's the PTR. It's available now. Check the description for the Discord link. Go and test it out. Try to get your feedback in by Tuesday morning at the latest to make sure that your voice is heard. If you've got any questions, be sure to let me know in the comments down here. Always good to interact with you guys. Always enjoy doing that. Let me know what you think about the proposed changes. As mentioned, you know, there's a few things that are just changing a little bit, but there's some real key reworks. What do you think about the Demon Warrior rework or the Pebble? And some of these, reading just them on paper is sort of step one. Actually trying them out, see how they work, that's step two. And of course, if you want to see the new cards, join the PTR and you can get your hands on them and test them out. That's pretty much it. Don't know if there's anything else I want to go for. Just a reminder to thank you guys again. Thanks so much for 2,000 subscribers. Really appreciate everyone that's on the journey, and always happy to have more people here. So if you don't want to miss out on any Minion Masters news, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'm Bad as a Fish, and this, as always, is an Awkward Wave.